new council person. And your members of your office will be hopping around from group to group. Is that correct?
Yes. So we'll plan on hopping around to different groups, helping to address questions that come up. And, you know, part of the reason that we're hosting the summit is to get the tough feedback from folks. We've heard some of that already. We want more of it because I am not the type of person who wants to introduce legislation half-baked. I want it to be as fully baked as possible while understanding that changes will be made along the way. So, you know, your tough feedback now only helps us get the best possible piece of legislation out there for introduction.
Great. All right. And without further ado, I will send you all away.
As you were so rudely yanked from your conversation, cut off mid-sentence and pulled back to the big group, but I'm glad you're all here. And I hope that you all had some vibrant and helpful conversations. I know I was bouncing around to different groups, and even just the small snippets of conversation I heard were incredibly helpful for me. And my team was in different groups as well. So we'll collect all that feedback we got from the moderators and be able to utilize it and continue the conversation. But for the time being, I am really excited for this next section because I think that we've had a lot of conversations about the barriers and the sort of challenges that we have. And we know that there are institutions, municipalities, other places that are organizations that are trying new initiatives, and we want to hear from those people who are working on those new initiatives. So I'm really excited to introduce 3 different people from 3 different organizations or kind of representing themselves to talk for a minute or 2 each about the initiatives. And please do, you know, share in your chat kind of your reactions, your thoughts, ideas that they produce. But I'm happy to introduce Sabrina Kaliba from Humane Action Pittsburgh, Ashley Deemer from Penn Environment, and Zaheen Hussein, a graduate student at Carnegie Mellon University, to discuss some of the initiatives that they're working on.
Should I kick us off?
Sure, Sabrina, let me highlight you.
And I just posted a link in the chat. That's what I'm going to just talk briefly a few minutes on. I'm Sabrina Salba. I'm from Humane Action Pittsburgh, and we are an animal advocacy organization working on a number of different issues around animals in the region. But part of what we work on is single-use plastic because of its connection to litter and harm that happens in the environment with animals. And we've been working on single-use plastic for a few years. We have a No Plastic Please campaign that's about individual responsibility and kind of like arming yourself to be able to say no to getting single-use plastic items when you're out in the world. That was pre-COVID. So taking your own cutlery. So when you go to the ice cream shop, you don't need to take that plastic spoon, those kinds of initiatives. As we spoke with people, we became more and more aware of the connection to composting and compostables as a piece of the solution to moving away from single-use plastic. Not to the point, to a lot of the comments that are made this morning, it's not the end all and be all solution. So it's not like we want to just move to disposables. If we can do reusable, that's definitely better. But it's a piece of it, especially in situations like takeout, where you're ordering, you want to support local restaurants. There's not really a feasible way for them to give you a reusable one. But the issue with compostables is you get a compostable back at your house and you don't know what to do with it, or maybe there's nothing you can do with it. There are actually a number of curbside services available to Pittsburgh residents to do composting, but there's not any unifying education program that businesses can maybe just tuck into their takeout bag to tell residents where they could potentially take their box back to, or what services they could use. And there's a lot of benefits to composting that go beyond takeout containers that have to do with food waste and the way we handle all waste within the city. And so we're working on this program called Reimagine Takeout that's really meant to be a centralized website resource that could be used as a reference that businesses could point consumers to, and also a way to sort of showcase the normalization of composting and the use of compostables in the region, and give people a one-stop shop where they could go and find out about composting classes through PRC or Grow Pittsburgh, or just other avenues that they could be composting themselves, either at home or through a service. If anybody is interested in working with us, partnering, or wants to be listed, or knows a business that should be listed on the website, this is kind of a preview. We haven't publicized it yet to the general public, but we have some content up there, and we're looking for feedback, suggestions, how to make it more useful, and ways to integrate it with all the other great composting related programs that are springing up in the city, but just don't have a unified place to find out about them.
Great, thank you, Sabrina. It's important to note in your resource document we sent out, information on all of these initiatives will be there for you to read more about. I'm going to go ahead and tag you, Zahin. We're ready.
Okay, so the hat that I'm putting on for this is my Triborough Eco District Steering Committee member and my former role as Millvale Sustainability Coordinator. So in 2018, as a part of Millvale's Green Business District goals, the Millvale Eco District Collaborative partnered with Tupelo Honey Teas, Yetter's Candies, and the Lincoln P&G Diner, which is colloquially known as Millvale Pamela's, to develop a pathway to reduce and eventually eliminate plastics and styrofoam. So it was led by Tupelo Honey Teas as Millvale's primary stakeholder, and they partnered with Sustainable Pittsburgh, with the Sustainable Pittsburgh Restaurant Program, actually, and Duquesne University Sustainable MBA program to conduct a feasibility study to better understand low-hanging fruit opportunities to reduce the use of plastics. Based upon those feasibility study findings, the initiative received a grant from New Sun Rising, a micro grant. It was about $1,500 or so, if I'm recalling correctly, to pilot a reusable plastic cup program, where partner businesses provided a discount on any beverage purchases a customer made with the Millvale branded cups. And the idea here was to pilot the reusable cup program, and if there was success found there, they would expand out to other Tupperwares and things that could be made available for purchase at each of the partner locations. Now, while the initiative has been put on pause, unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the businesses themselves have indicated a long-term interest in revisiting and expanding the initiative in the future. So as kind of the Plastic Collaborative takes off and more communities look to reduce their uses of single-use plastics, keep these businesses in mind as people who are open and willing to partner and listen to new ideas and try things out. Again, Tupelo Honey Teas, Yetter's Candies, and the Lincoln P&G Diner, or Pamela's, again, as we all call it, actually. But yeah, that's what we have going on the north side of the river here.
Great, and now I'll just replace your spotlight with Ashley, who will speak to us about some of Penn Environment's initiatives.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. I am Ashley Deemer. I'm the Deputy Director of Penn Environment. And if you're not familiar, Penn Environment's a statewide environmental advocacy organization. We have home bases in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, and we work on a wide variety of issues, including reducing single-use plastics. And kind of no matter the campaign, I think it's useful for you to know that our goal is advancing policy change, because we know that's where we can have the broadest impact. So whether it's the local, state, or national level, we're talking to legislators, we are educating them about the issues, we're trying to tee up new policies that we think will solve our greatest environmental challenges. And at the same time, we're also spending a lot of time educating the public and mobilizing the public on these issues so that decision makers hear from their constituents and understand that these are important problems to solve. So I just want to run quickly through some of the things we've done on plastics recently. First, earlier this year, we researched and released a new report called Microplastics in PA. And I'm going to put the link in the chat here. Essentially, microplastics are exactly what they sound like. A lot of people here know what they are, but plastics break down. They never go away, but they do break down into tiny pieces. And as we heard from Myrna earlier, plastics float. And so anytime it rains, we have stormwater. Those microplastics make their way to our rivers and streams and our waterways. And then they're consumed by wildlife. They're taken up through the food chain. They convey toxics. So we want to really reduce those as much as possible. But the research we did in the microplastics report essentially confirmed the presence of microplastics in all 53 waterways that we tested across Pennsylvania. So we looked at rivers and streams, including the 3 rivers, and we found microplastics in every single one of them. So that's an interesting read that we think will help contribute to the public's understanding of this issue. We did a fair bit of outreach around that. And plastic bags are actually a big contributor to microplastics. That film breaks down and makes its way into our waterways. So now we are working to educate the public in Pittsburgh about plastic bag bans and the benefits that they can have. So we've spent the summer reaching out to businesses and community organizations to build support for this kind of policy that we can then direct towards helping Councilperson Strasburger pass this bill, essentially making sure that City Council hears from people and stakeholders who matter to them. So right now, we have more than 80 signers on this sign-on letter, the bulk of which are small businesses and community groups. And some of you are already on the call today, but if you are not yet signed on to this letter and you're interested in looking at it and reviewing it and maybe signing on, I'm going to put the link to the letter and the form in the chat as well, and we'll try to send that around in the follow-up materials too. But we think this will be a really useful tool when this bill comes up for consideration by City Council, and we're going to continue building support for it through other activism as well. So if you're interested in ways that you can, be a voice in support of these kinds of policies, you can also feel free to reach out to me by email. And I think that's all I have for now, but thank you for having me.
All right, thank you all. Thank you, Ashley, Taheen, and Sabrina for your sharing your initiatives. Again, we encourage everyone to share your own initiatives and ideas in the chat. We'll have some time in breakout rooms at the end of this to further discuss those creative solutions. But now, to round out our summit, I am so pleased to introduce our closing speaker, Dr. Eric Beckman. Dr. Beckman is a professor at the University of Pittsburgh Swanson School of Engineering, whose focus is on sustainable design of chemical products. So I want to offer a warm welcome to Dr. Beckman, and I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Councilwoman. Hopefully I can just share my screen. Looks like I can, and then we can go. One thing is I'm happy to answer questions at the end, or if you have questions you remember after I'm done, send me emails. It's fine. I've been fighting with this for a long time, so I'm happy to expound on it. This is going to be very top line. I'm going to cover way too much ground in a short period of time, but just to introduce you where we are, how the hell did we get here, and what is it going to take to move forward? So off we go. I think most of you know this part. Polymers have been remarkably economically successful for any number of reasons, and the growth is continuing unabated, problems notwithstanding. These things are now produced at over 350 million tons per year, which is just an extraordinary number if you think about it. It's just beyond our ability to comprehend almost. But 8.5% overall growth per year since 1950, it's pretty remarkable. When we talk about plastics, we normally talk about thermoplastics, and basically it's the big seven that I've listed here are over 90% of what's being produced every year. And I've kind of grouped them into families. So you've got the polyolefins, which are all chemical cousins, high density and low density polyethylene and polyprop. PVC and polystyrene are kind of chemical cousins themselves. And PET, also known as polyester, the ubiquitous Coca-Cola and Pepsi bottle, is a chemical cousin to polyurethanes. And you've got, again, over 90%. These things were developed, they were discovered, they weren't really designed. They were discovered between the 1920s and about 1960. So they've been around for a long time. And again, they weren't designed, they were stumbled upon. And really anyone who was around that was part of the original teams to create these things is long since dead. These were created not only before all of you were born, but before I was born, meaning the late 18th century, just kidding. And the key is when these things were discovered and then applied, they were never intended to be used more than once. They're all long chains, and when you reprocess long chains, they inevitably break. At least some of them do. So these things were not intended to be used more than once to begin with. And now, 100 years after the first ones were created, now we're trying to figure out basically how to stick a square peg into a round hole, take something that was never designed to be reused and find ways to reuse them. So it's important to keep that in mind. We know that a lot of the synthetic polymers created are used in packaging, very short lifetimes, used once, lifetime of minutes to days to weeks maybe, and then thrown away. What maybe is not known quite so much is that a lot of the other categories where polymers are applied, we're seeing lifetime shrinking. You've heard of fast fashion. What that means is that each of us is typically responsible for between, 80 and 100 pounds of textile waste every year. And by and large, textiles can't be reused for the most part because of the way they're produced. I was going to say designed, but designed is the wrong word to use here. And in addition, look at our phones. They contain a lot of plastic, and the average cell phone has a lifetime of maybe a year to 18 months, and over 1 billion are produced every year. So even the things we think of that have polymers that are not packaging, the lifetimes are shrinking, and that's not good. The other thing that's important to remember is that most synthetic polymer material is produced in Asia now. And some of it's exported to the United States. A lot of it is used where it's produced. And so North America accounts for less than a fifth. And Asia now is at least half, and that's growing. So this is a global issue where influence, if you're going to have influence, it has to be extended beyond just Pittsburgh, beyond Pennsylvania. We have to have global influence to really address this problem. We do a really poor job recycling these materials. And again, it's because they weren't intended to be reused. But more of this material is burned, particularly in Europe. In Europe, incineration for recovery of energy is considered to be a form of recycling. I don't consider it a form of recycling, but a lot of the Europeans do. So more is still burned, particularly in Europe, than is recycled. Even when we try and recycle stuff, we do a poor job of it. And it's not because we're not trying, it's because, and I'll show you this in a minute, there are some severe technical obstacles to doing effective recycling. So if we look at this recycled material, about 14%, but note that 4% of that, or a third of the stuff we're trying to recycle, just gets lost. It just vanishes. It becomes waste, but of a different sort. The vast majority of stuff that even we're trying to recycle is downcycled. It gets used in lower value applications. In other words, plastic speed bumps, plastic park benches, all well and good, but very low value things. Effective recycling, in other words, really turning something back into its original use, is 2%. So we have a lot of room to grow here where recycling is concerned. And I think my thesis is that we're not going to be able to get there with today's technology. I think it's been demonstrated over and over again that we need some pretty big changes. So what's the problem here? Why is all the downcycling? I mean, we collect it, right? We put it in our bins. Why not just clean it up and remelt it and refabricate it back into things. So what is the problem here? I don't think this is as well known as it should be. I'd call it a problem of separations and a few other things. So first of all, why do we have to separate all the plastics one from another? Why can't we just, collect them and remelt them and make kind of polymeric alloys and then turn those back into really high value things? Well, the problem is one of thermodynamics. And I imagine that you people like thermodynamics just as much as my students do, which means not at all. But it does drive how a lot of the world works. And thermodynamics teaches us that big molecules don't like to mix with each other if they're of different types. If you try to take some polystyrene and you try to mix it with some polyethylene in a melt, at the micro level, it's going to behave like oil and water, which as you can see in this right-hand panel here. So that when it actually solidifies, it's going to be a very weak construct. It'll have all of those interfaces or weak points. And what you'll end up with is something that has much poorer properties than what you started with from either the polyethylene or the polystyrene. So what this says is you've got to separate these things in order to have a shot at this. So why don't we just separate them? You've all seen these material recycling facilities where things are going down the belt and you've got scanners and such that are trying to separate these things. So why not just do that? It should be an easy problem, right, to solve. Well, unfortunately, no. And this is where I bring in what I call my 3 C's that work against effective separation and hence reuse of traditional synthetic materials: customization, contamination, and complexity. And this is my own terminology. So it's the way I look at this problem. Contamination, I don't think I have to explain that to you. If you've ever been to a MRF, a material recycling facility, everything is contaminated with things we do expect and things we don't expect. I mean, for example, people putting motor oil into a plastic bottle, using the motor oil, then throwing the plastic bottle away, then the motor oil is in there and it shouldn't be. So contamination is a serious issue to try and reuse these materials because they have to be extensively cleaned. And then there's customization and complexity. So I want to talk briefly about what those mean, at least to me, and why they're an issue. Well, when you're trying to sell something to customers, customization is great. Everyone as a customer wants to think that you're designing your stuff just for them and that you've created a product that works perfectly for them. And that you have a suite of products so that you can choose the one that's best. We buy clothing. We like to get just the color we want. I mean, orange looks terrible on me. So I'm very happy that clothing isn't all orange. That would be a real problem for me. But customization makes separation and recycling a hideously difficult separation problem. And it's, to my mind, nearly impossible to fix. So I'll give you an example of where customization is particularly insidious and one that I imagine most people aren't aware of. You've all seen HDPE and LDPE and LLDPE, and they're all polyethylene. So what's the issue? Well, chemically, they're the same, but the shape of the molecule is different. So we have LDPE, which has these long branches, and then we have this material here, the LLDPE, which has a number of short branches, and HDPE, which has a couple of short branches. And these things impact the way the material flows when it's melted and the physical properties once it solidifies. And these were developed and scaled up because different ways of fabricating products work best with different types of polyethylenes. And whereas these things are made by very large companies, big multinational companies that you don't really feel too bad about by hammering, all of this sort of work is done by small companies with a few employees. And this is part of a small business ecosystem. And making different things typically works best with different types of fabrication processes. Yes, we have blow molding to make film, injection molding, which makes all sorts of cups and tubs and other things. And in addition, we can have things like rotational molding, which is great for making those really large polyethylene storage containers that some of us may have in our garages where things go to die, so to speak, but we like to store them. Thermoforming is another one, which is great for punching out, for example, strawberry and blueberry containers. So all of these things require slightly different physical properties to work best. And the polymer makers have found ways to create them using different kinds of polyethylene. And what I have here is just a map of the sweet spot of different things. So injection molding, HDPE, this is its sweet spot in terms of the extent to which it flows readily. That's the x-axis. And the density, which describes basically it's a surrogate for physical properties. And so if I bring back two kinds of polyethylene and I mix them together, you think, well, it's just polyethylene and polyethylene, should be fine. But by mixing them, I may go from being in a couple of sweet spots to, if I mix them together, I might be outside of all of the sweet spots. And so now I have something where I've brought it back, I've got it just as polyethylene, but then if I mix it, I may still be downcycling. And this is really what customization, the insidious part of customization, it gives you this map of all these sweet spots so that everybody who's trying to fabricate these things gets just what they need. But then it creates an impossible separation problem. And I took this quote right off of a website of a large regional company that makes polyethylene, and they offer 150 different grades in order to satisfy everybody. But by satisfying everybody, separation for recycling is just a hideous problem. Customization also includes things like color. If I say Tide laundry detergent, you all will think a big orange red bottle. And indeed, that's part of Procter & Gamble's brand for Tide, is the color. We all like things to be the color we want to signify our brand. But now you bring them back, and if you don't separate them by color, it can be a real serious problem, because then you end up something that when you mix the colors, you get maybe weird brown or salmon pink. In addition, and this is not known by, I think, most folk, but if the plastic is black, the scanners at the MRF can't see it. So if you ever watch things going down the belt, you'll see the scanner sees things and then shoots them off into the appropriate bin, trying to separate by material type. But if something black comes by, it just shoots all the way through because the scanners can't even see it. In addition, all polymers are mixtures. It's not just polyethylene. They're filled with different additives, and different people's products have different additive packages in them, and they don't always work and play well with each other. And so this is another aspect of customization, where these additive packages and types of polyethylene make it perfect for the fabricator, but it makes recycling really problematic. There's an example of complexity. People like using polymers for food packaging because it's light. And so it's easy to ship, use less energy while shipping. The problem is that what you want from food packaging is a really low rate of water permeation, that's the x-axis here, and a low rate of oxygen permeation so that the food stays fresh. This big blue dot I have down near the origin, that's the permeation rates for glass and aluminum. They're almost zero. That's great. You can package stuff in aluminum or glass and it stays fresh for a long time because of that, but they're heavy. So when we try to use polymers, well, the permeation rates are actually much higher. And that's not good. So what we do is we create laminates where we've got a thin layer of aluminum sandwiched between plastic and cardboard to make things like juice boxes or food pouches that you see in a variety of grocery stores. They cannot be recycled. We can't separate the layers to reuse them using current technology. So this is a case where complexity works for the application that they're being created for. That makes recycling just monstrously difficult. And this is not a small amount. So this is in the US alone, over 4 million tons of these multi-layer laminates were created in 2017. Again, if you're packaging food and you're trying to make lightweight packaging, it works for that. Recycling, though, because of the complexity, it just creates a nightmare. Okay, so separation and reuse of current polymer constructs is just hideously complex. Maybe we can do it a different way. And the two I'm going to discuss briefly, one is chemical recycling, and the other is circular design, which to me, that's our future, if we can figure out how to do it, like anything else. So first, a little bit about chemical recycling. You may have heard the term. When we make polymers, they're just long chains. So to make them, we string monomers together. So for the polyolefins or polystyrene or PVC, the monomer is all the same. I call them the A's. We just string the A's together and we get poly A, which is one of these four. Some of them are alternating. There's a BC, BC type of pattern, and that's PET, the polyester, or polyurethane. So that's how we make the polymers. In chemical recycling, the idea is we have to unmake them. And then hopefully there's some other steps we have to do to make this work. But the first thing is, can we get the reaction to go the other direction? Can we start with the chains and make it go backwards to end up with the monomers we started with? Now, some people actually, when they do chemical recycling, count making something that's just a fuel that can be burned as recycling. I do not. I don't think that's kosher. Real recycling is the reuse of the material in an equal or higher value application. And burning something as a fuel to me doesn't count. But you'll see that out there. Where somebody says we're chemically recycling X, and some of it is high quality diesel fuel. Fine, it's diesel fuel, it's not recycling. So how do we do this successfully? Well, the first thing we have to do is find a way to fragment the polymer, to make it go backwards to little fragments. Now, remember I told you about customization. So these things are filled with additives and pigments and dyes. Once we generate the fragments, we have to separate the fragments from all of the additives that we've put in there to make the original polymer construct attractive to customers. And then once we do that, sometimes we create more than one type of fragment, depending on the polymer, and we have to separate the fragments from each other. So it's both a chemistry problem and a separations problem, and it's really difficult. So where are we at? Well, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And what I love about people who make PET is, they always tell me that, oh, our polymer, we can chemically recycle it, as if they worked hard to do this. But it turns out PET, because of its chemistry, naturally goes both directions. So when you make PET, you have two monomers, the blue ones and the brown ones, and you string those together, and every time a blue and a brown react together, you produce one molecule of methanol. And the way we make this polyester is we raise the temperature, we react the blues and the browns, and we suck off the methanol. And that drives the reaction towards making long chains. If you want to make it go back the other way, you add methanol and heat, and it naturally goes back the other way. This has been known for many decades, but since before I was even in graduate school. Now there are folks that are, quote, rediscovering chemical recycling of PET, which always amuses me because they seem to have forgotten that Eastman pioneered this back in the 80s before there was really an interest in doing this. But it's just lucky. It just turns out that this polymer naturally goes both directions. And what's ironic is that we don't need to chemically recycle PET because there's a market for it now. If you have nice clean bottles, you can turn it into polyester fiberfill for jackets. You can turn it back into bottles. PET is the easiest polymer out there to actually recycle in a traditional way. Most of it has no pigment in it. It's just clear soda, typical soda bottles or water bottles. And as far as the other polymers, polyolefins are more than half of the problem, and they should be a key target for chemical recycling. We don't know how to do it effectively yet. The PVC is impossible to chemical recycle. Polyurethane, people are working on it, but they're nowhere close. And polystyrene, it's at pilot scale. There's still issues there. So PET is the easiest to chemically recycle, but ironically, it's the least important. So chemical recycling, interesting, not ready for prime time. A lot of work needs to be done before we're really close to doing this effectively. So then what I want to finish up with is a section on circular design. This is designing something so that it has multiple lives. I have to tell you that people have been designing products for a long time, and designing something for multiple lives is very new. Circular design, circularity has really only been a thing, if you will, since about 2011, when the Ellen MacArthur Foundation really started to push this over in Europe. And so much remains unknown, but it's a really admirable way of doing design, designing waste out of the system. I think that's really the design mechanism for the future, if we can figure out how to do it. And you're wondering, well, what do you mean if we can figure out how to do it? Well, I have something to illustrate that. And that is, what do we need to actually practice and hence teach it? We've been teaching design of these things the same way, again, since the 20s. Now we have something that was really put forth in about, say, 2010, more or less, that asks us to do something very, very different. So we have to understand how to do it in order to be able to teach it. And so my example for this is here. This is a classic chemical engineering design problem. And no, I'm not trying to recruit you to be chemies. This is something that we teach to juniors. So it's about creating a heat exchanger network in a large plant. In a large plant, you have lots of hot streams, lots of cold streams, and you don't want to waste energy. So you want to figure out what's the ideal way to arrange the heat exchangers so that you're using as little primary energy as possible. If you have a hot stream, based on the fact that you ran a reaction and it gave off heat, is there a cold stream somewhere else that needs to be heated up so you can cross the two and then not waste the energy that was created by the chemical reaction? So the desired outcome, everyone agrees on. Most efficient use of energy within the plant. That's great. Agreeing on the desired outcome is crucial. The strategy, it's a graphical technique that was developed 70s and the 80s and the 90s that tells you how to arrange the heat exchangers in the most efficient way. Tools. We have basic equations that are now embedded in software that incorporate mass and energy balances. They're the design expressions. And the fundamentals, they're basic thermal conductivities and other physical properties of all of the fluids concerned that allow you to do this in a closed form way. In other words, all of the puzzle pieces are in place. And because of that, I can teach it to knuckleheaded juniors. That may be redundant. Maybe all juniors are knuckleheads. But you can teach this to juniors in about 3 weeks. And then they're able to step right from that into industry and practice this. That's a good design situation. So are the puzzle pieces in place for circular design? Well, we have a list of desired outcomes. These were all admirable. These are things that I've accumulated by going through the literature on this. These are all valuable and viable desired outcomes. Well, is one more important than another? Are they all equally important? Is there a hierarchy of these that we should be looking at? Do different members on this list apply to different parts of the economy more so than others? We don't know yet. Design strategies, it's similar. All of these are design strategies that have been used out there since 2010, 2011 to try to create circular products. Again, is there a hierarchy here? Should we be looking at design for emotional attachment first? If we have something that you're emotionally attached to, you hold on to it longer and therefore use it more. I still use a coffee cup that my daughter created when she was in first grade. She's now a second-year law student. And I love that because she made it. And so I've been using that for a long time, over 20 years, because there's emotional attachment. Can we design things for that? Is that the most important one on the list? Or what is the hierarchy here? We don't really know. Then there are tools. Remember I told you those were the design equations that we use to make the individual heat exchangers. The tools are going to vary by industry and product type. And frankly, they don't exist yet. We might agree on the desired outcomes. We might agree on some of the strategies. We don't have the tools in place. And the reason we don't have the tools, which are often design equations, is because a lot of the basic science is missing. Because again, this is something that's only been a thing since 2011. So for about 10 years, the heat exchanger problem I showed you, folks have been working on that since the 1930s. Now, again, the work accelerated tremendously after about 85 with increasing computer power. But still, we've had almost a century of work to get to the point where any junior in chemical engineering can learn to be an effective heat exchange network designer in 3 weeks because of all the work we've done. We're not there yet with circular design, but we need to be. We need to put more effort into bringing this forward as fast as we can. And I'm going to end up with something we're doing at Pitt, just because this is an example of things that I like to do. And we call this one trying to recycle the unrecyclable. And that is looking at thermosets. Now, what's a thermoset? Well, the picture on the left is a typical thermoplastic, long chains of monomers. Those are the individual circles. And because they're individual chains, I can melt them and form them into shapes. In a thermoset, all of the chains are tied together so that once I do that, it's called curing, the stuff is really tough. It's very strong, but it can't be remelted. So even if I get a thermoset back and it's clean, the best I can do is maybe grind it up and burn it or bury it. These things are ubiquitous throughout the economy. Again, over 40 million tons in 2020, and this is in the US. This is typically how they're done. Epoxy is a great example. We've all used epoxies, everything from Mighty Putty to liquid adhesives. And in epoxies, there's an A type and a B type. So we have the A's, which are these dark blue squiggles, and the B's are the light blue squiggles. And the light blue reacts with the dark blue, and it makes this network. And typically, to make a thermoset, to make it stronger, we add glass or other fibers. Fiberglass, for example, that's a glass fiber embedded in a cross-linked polyester polystyrene type of matrix. So these things are everywhere. Here's some examples. Everything from manufactured wood, which is a classic thermoset, which is used everywhere and cannot be recycled, and it doesn't degrade either, even though it's made from wood because of the polymeric thermoset that holds it all together. Modern airplanes are thermosets. And ironically, and somewhat sadly, the turbines of windmills, and these turbines are used to make sustainable energy, but at the end of their life, they just have to be buried because you can't do anything with them because they're thermosets. You can't melt them. The chains are tied together permanently. So the way we've approached this is, okay, can we make one that I can make go in both directions? So I know how everyone likes organic chemistry. Even chemical engineers hate organic chemistry. So I've turned this into cartoons. And this is the way we're working on research on a reversible thermoset. In other words, an inherently recyclable thermoset. So what we have is the A and the B parts. So we have the purple one and this yellow one with the little green sticks coming off of it. The reinforcement is meant to represent fiberglass or polyaramid or some other fiber that you put in there. And the idea is that the triangles fit beautifully into these little green arms, if you will, there. That's how the reaction works. So I've got the A and the B parts and the reinforcement. The way this is working is we take these, we mix them together, and they react together to form a network where the reinforcement, the fibers, are actually chemically bonded to the rest of the polymeric network. The difference between this and a conventional epoxy is that then we can apply a trigger. Now, it's a trigger that you can't encounter in its normal use patterns. Because, for example, you don't want it to be light-based, because what if you had a windmill turbine that was spinning around, and if it was exposed to sunlight, the last thing you want is to have it suddenly fall apart. So it has to be a trigger that the material would never see during its use phase. The idea is you apply a trigger, and the reaction goes backwards. So now we have all the individual pieces again. But if we just let it sit there, it'll just react again and do this. So then we have to design these so that they're really easy to separate. So it's a double design problem. How do you make the chemistry go backwards using a defined trigger that it would never see during the use phase, and then design these pieces so that it's easy to separate the purple ones from the yellow ones from the reinforcement? And that's what I've got a graduate student working on at Pitt right now. And it's just a different way of thinking about the chemistry of thermosets. So my summary here is again, the current polymers that are bedeviling us were never intended to be used more than once. We need to, if we're going to recycle effectively, we need to separate these things to the point where they don't cross-contaminate each other. And my 3 C's, contamination, customization, and complexity, make that traditional recycling really challenging, which is why you see such low effective recycle rates and where downcycling tends to dominate. Chemical recycling could address part of the problem, but it's still not ready for prime time for the most part. And to me, circular design is the future, but frankly, we don't know how to do it effectively yet. We've only been looking at this for about a decade, and we're just now starting to create the fundamental science and the tools we need to make this real solid design. So with that, thanks for having me. I know this is an awful lot of stuff, awfully fast, but I'd be happy to answer questions you might have on any of this and on things that I didn't include. Because like I said, this problem has been, I've been neck deep in this sort of problem for the last 15 years. And it's not getting any easier, I got to tell you. But it is. I love a challenge, and to me, this is where the field needs to go. So thanks much. I did see one question. My slides are available for anyone that wants them. There's nothing top secret in here. There's nothing that I worry about. So I sent a PDF of the files to Ali, and anyone that wants that, I have no problem with that. I give talks, they don't include proprietary or confidential anything. So my slides are available to anyone who wants them. Oh, and by the way, Councilwoman, go get them. The only way that we're going to get more circular design done is if you kick people in the ass. So this is all I can tell you is go get them.
Well, thank you, Dr. Beckman. I'll take that as a segue back to me because I fully intend to. So I think what we heard here is that, this is just another part of the conversation, evidence that we've done 100 years of research to get us where we are today, but we're in the infancy of the research that we need to get us to where we want to be. Hopefully it's a shorter amount of time than 100 years. Hopefully and I see Eric nodding. So yes, hopefully in our lifetimes, we can see a significant change in the research that needs to happen to get us to circular, chemical recycling and a circular design, but we're not there yet. So we need federal government support. We need support from everywhere, from businesses, and we need policies to sort of force that to happen. And so my hope is that we start small and then it snowballs from there. But thank you so much, Dr. Beckman, for this presentation. I think everyone can agree that it was among the most informative presentations we've seen on this topic for many of us, and for those who aren't chemical engineers, let's just say. So with that, I'm really happy to close out this summit. It's not the end. There is going to be time for continued conversation in breakout rooms and for networking and for other conversation. But I really just want to offer a big thank you to all of the organizations and individuals that helped to plan this event, especially Sustainable Pittsburgh, who was this entire time behind the scenes managing the technology portion of this and really just helping to market this and pull it together. All the other partners, all of the speakers, all of our moderators, everyone from my office, and all of you for the work that you're doing day in and day out, whether as volunteers or paid staff or as part of your organizations and institutions. It's all part of what we need to do. Clearly, this is a group of, ranging from 35 to 65 today, and we have 300,000 people in the city, about 1 million people countywide. We need to do the work now to bring this conversation out into the communities that are going to be impacted by this and are going to be part of the solution as well. So big job in front of us. But, I am a big believer that change can happen in a lot of different ways. You can inform people and that might change their behavior. You can use kind of social change methods of getting your friends and family to make a change, and that just then snowballs from there. And sometimes legislation can force a change and force behavior change that people might be resistant to at first, and then 6 months later they get used to. It's all part of it. And so I'm grateful for my council colleagues, 3 of whom had I know many of whom support this, and 3 of whom have representatives here today. So I wanted to call out council members Bruce Krause, Corey O'Connor, and Deb Gross for sending representatives from their offices here today as well. So thank you all. Big thanks to everyone again. And we are now going to shift over to a more sort of casual breakout room setting where we can talk, continue to brainstorm, and just sort of meet others who maybe you saw from across the room today, but didn't get a chance to talk with. So thanks again. And please stay in touch. You should be hearing from the group of organizers in about a week, or at least next week, with more resources and information. So please let us know what other kind of responses, reactions you have, and be on the lookout for that.
Hey,
Thanks, everyone.
Councilperson, is there a way for us to see who was all on the chat and maybe connect with them if we don't get to be in the room with them? I don't know, just an idea, like, is there a way for us to maybe connect with somebody that, we liked and maybe we're not in the same break room or something like that? I don't know, just a thought, maybe there's a list, or if whoever feels comfortable with that. I don't want, just kind of like to connect with people.
I will punt that over to the folks who are to Allie and the folks who are handling the technology aspect of this. But at the very least, I can say that we have the potential to send out to everyone who's receiving the follow-up email a list of attendees and their associations if they have that. So if that's something that people are interested in, we can help facilitate an introduction there as necessary afterwards. But I'll turn it to Allie now to to see what's possible technologically.
Sure. What I was going to say basically, Chef Claudia, was that we could include your contact information in any outreach we do post-event. You can also feel free to put it in the chat. I believe everybody has access to that. I think, I'm not sure because I'm a host, I think you may be able to direct message people via chat. And I can also make it available to everybody to hop around breakout groups if they would like. So if there was somebody that you wanted to connect with, you can go ahead and find them if they are involved in the breakout rooms and perhaps get in touch with them. With that, I think we can stop recording. And I will push you all out.